Blizzard Entertainment presents 1,000 Years of War, the story of Alleria and Turalyon by Robert Brooks, narrated by Stephen Pacey. Part 2, The Emerald Star.
Step forward, Turalyon, son of Dorus. It is time.
Turalyon stepped into the column of light. He was not alone. Alleria stayed with him.
The path of light is different for all of its children. Tell us how it led you here.
I was born into the nobility of Lordaeron. I studied in the ways of the light as a boy, and I became a priest, healing the sick and the wounded. I took up arms when my world was invaded, and with my brethren of the Silver Hand, I learned to wield the light on the battlefield.
And what will you do now?
I will serve the light until my dying day. This I swear.
So the light shall bless you. Take a moment to prepare.
Alleria gently grasped Turalyon's hands. His palms were down, hers up. They stood face to face, the light shining down on them both.
Are you nervous?
She asked. Turalyon smiled.
I am.
The gentle murmur of Zira's presence surrounded them.
Your old life has passed. The light will forge you a new one.
I am ready, Zira.
The light descended upon him. Alleria could feel Turalyon's pulse thumping evenly but strongly. His hands began to grip hers tightly. His skin grew warmer to the touch.
I will see you on the other side, my love,
Alleria said. The light delved into him. He did not flinch. Zira's words filled the silence.
The light will grant you wisdom. The light will heal your scars. The light will show you your destiny.
He went unnaturally still, his hands dead weights. Alleria knew his mind was now being borne across an ocean of creation.
What is he seeing?
She whispered.
When one is forged in the light, one sees their past. Then they see glimpses of their future. I hope he brings back good news. The Burning Legion has changed the fate of all things. But where fate has changed once, it can change again. It is through beings like you, Turalyon, and the rest of the Army of the Light, that it will be so. Light willing.
Alleria knew it would be a long wait for Turalyon to return. She closed her eyes. She let her mind roam, seeking the same thing she always sought. Today, she was rewarded. Images filled her mind. Not a vision. No, this was not a glimpse of what had happened or what might happen. This was happening right now. She was sure of it. Alleria gazed upon a city, half-built, the rubble of wars past not entirely cleared away. Stormwind. It had to be Stormwind. The humans had begun to rebuild it. It was a bright, sunny day, and the path to the city walls was filled with throngs of people, soldiers and civilians and nobility. Standing before them was a number of dignitaries. She saw banners from Stormwind, Lordaeron, and Quel'Thalas. In front of that banner was her sister, Sylvanas. Alleria's heart soared. Most of the Windrunner lineage had died when the Horde invaded. Sylvanas was one of the few who hadn't. She still bore the insignia of a leader, Ranger General of Silvermoon. Pride beat in Alleria's soul like a drum. Outside the walls of Stormwind, rows of statues had been erected. She recognized all of their likenesses. There was Kurdran Wildhammer, Danath Trollbane, Archmage Khadgar, and there was Turalyon. Right next to him was a statue of Alleria. The Alliance must have believed that all who had remained on Draenor were dead. Alleria knew many of the expedition's members had survived. She had seen it through the light. But they must not have found a way back to Azeroth yet. Alleria let her consciousness float over the crowd. They were all looking upward. Yes, she recognized some of the elves there. Warriors, fellow hunters, magi, friends. And there, right there, was a little boy, sitting on the shoulders of a paladin. Arator. Her son was still a child, so tiny. He had been a few months old when she had left for war. For him, only a couple of years had passed since. His eyes were wide, his head tilted. He was looking at a face he didn't remember. Alleria felt tears welling beneath her eyelids.
Speak to him.
I do not know what to say.
Through the light, you can say more than words.
Alleria understood. She thought back on those precious few months when she had held him in her arms. She let herself float in those memories, embracing her pure, infinite love for her child. Through the light, she shared that emotion with him. She saw him look around. She saw him smile. And then he looked back up at the statue of her, reaching with his hand. It was the same gesture he had made as a baby, trying to touch her chin. Joy filled her heart so intensely it hurt.
He does not know my face.
He will return here again and again to see your face. And he will know you love him.
Thank you, Zira.
Turalyon's journey was coming to an end. The light flashed from within him. He opened his eyes. They shone just for a moment. He lifted his head and took a deep breath. Alleria knew it was done. His pulse was stronger than ever, and each heartbeat thundered with the light.
Welcome back. How do you feel, Turalyon?
Like I am awake for the first time in my life.
His eyes were brimming with tears.
I saw Arator. He was grown, a paladin, standing beneath a crimson sky looking down at me. I could feel nothing but pride for him. You were right, Alleria. It is our fate to see him again.
He pulled her into an embrace. She twined her arms around his neck, and his tears fell upon her cheek. He kept his hold on her as he spoke to Zira.
I saw the Emerald Star. Our war against the Burning Legion will reveal it to us in time. We must be patient.
Then we are walking the path of destiny. You have done well, Turalyon.
Zira announced the good news to the rest of the Army of the Light.
Turalyon, a child of Azeroth, a human of Lordaeron, a paladin of the Silver Hand, has crossed the boundaries of mortality. He has been found worthy to become an eternal protector of creation. He has been forged in the light.
The others were there in an instant, offering congratulations and embraces of their own. They were already brothers and sisters in arms. They had fought battles together, spilled blood together, and mourned fallen comrades together. But now Turalyon was not simply a wielder of the light. He had become one with it, like most of them. Lithraxian stepped up to Turalyon and clasped his hand the way humans did. Alleria watched with a concealed grin. Lithraxian had insisted on practicing that with her days ago. He turned to her with an eager smile.
How did I do?
Marvelous. The courts of Lordaeron would think you very polite.
Your ascension will come, Alleria. I know it.
Light willing,
she replied. But if it had taken Turalyon, a man who had studied the light since childhood, so long to earn this honor, she knew hers was still some time away. That did not concern her. The light had granted her peace today. She no longer feared that her son would live his entire life before she saw him again. For Azeroth, it had been only a couple of years since they left. For Alleria and Turalyon, it had been more than 40. When the Army of the Light welcomed Alleria and Turalyon into its ranks, it brought them to their new home, the Zenadar. It was a magnificent vessel, wrought from the Light's greatest minds, capable of traversing the twisting nether and sustaining its occupants for long voyages. It was also the Light's largest remaining refuge, and the only one capable of waging war against the Burning Legion. Alleria and Turalyon soon joined the army on its raids of Legion strongholds, but first they had to adjust to life in the twisting nether. The erratic passage of time was an unexpected hurdle to overcome. While a week would pass on Azeroth, Alleria and Turalyon might experience a month passing, or 10, or more. The years seemed to blend together. But they certainly were not idle, which helped them focus. Turalyon had joined the Council of Exarchs to learn their form of military strategy. After a few years, he had worked with the Zenadar's smiths to forge a new weapon, a sword imbued with holy power. That meant he needed to train relentlessly to master it. Alleria had her own training. She had begun to study the ways of holy warfare. Within 2 years, from Alleria and Turalyon's perspective, her arrows were wreathed in the power of the light. She could have foregone her bow and arrows altogether, but it pleased her to bring Thasdara, the legacy of her family, into battle against the forces of evil. Lithraxion encouraged it.
Every one of us carries our past into war, but not all of us can use it as a weapon,
he said. He was a Nathrazim, whose race had been enslaved by the Legion long ago. Alleria soon considered him a close friend and a remarkable source of knowledge. He had spent millennia fighting on the side of demons before he had been purified by the light, so he knew how they thought, how they acted, and what they feared.
The Burning Legion does not fear the light,
he said. Alleria shook her head.
Are they truly so arrogant?
Sargeras believes he has already defeated the light.
Lithraxion offered a humorless smile.
What he truly wants is to destroy the shadow. That was my duty long ago. I hunted down creatures of the void for the Legion. Very dangerous work.
It wasn't long before Alleria learned what he meant firsthand. About 50 years after she had left Draenor, the Army of the Light raided a small Legion prison world. When they arrived, every demon there was already dead. Permanently dead. They had been dragged into the twisting nether and butchered. That was the only way to put an immortal demonic soul to rest forever. Even the prisoners had been slaughtered.
This is the Shadow's work,
Lithraxion announced.
Be cautious.
They carefully searched the place, looking for any survivors. As Alleria investigated a row of blood-spattered cells, a living avatar of Shadow appeared out of thin air, wrapping its incorporeal hand around her throat and slamming dark magic into her mind, trying to kill her. Only an instant passed before she called down the light upon her attacker. But in that moment, when the touch of the Shadow had been upon her, her mind was transported elsewhere. Blink. She saw herself walking upon the surface of another world, one filled with demons, one she had only heard about, Argus. Blink. She stood in front of the Emerald Star and felt its terrible warmth on her face. It reached out to her, begging for help. Blink. She saw herself stepping off a cliff, falling into an infinite darkness, smiling all the way. She saw the peace in her own eyes. The moment passed, and the light crashed down upon her attacker, destroying it instantly. She fell to the ground, gasping. Turalyon rushed to her side. The light flowed into her, healing the pain.
Alleria, what happened?
Alleria forced a wry tone into her voice as she stood up.
I was warned to be careful. Perhaps next time I will listen.
She did not explain what she had seen. How could she, when she did not understand it herself? It had felt as real as any foresight she had received from the light, and yet it clearly had not been a holy vision. The light and the shadow had collided within her soul, and from that, Alleria had glimpsed something true. She could not explain how. Over the next several weeks, Alleria asked Lithraxion to tell her more about the Shadow. When he told her about the creatures he had fought, he grew somber.
I have known enslavement, but serving the Legion was a mercy compared to what the Void Spawn endure.
He muttered.
And the corrupted creatures, the ones who once knew freedom, light have mercy on their souls. Once you've invited the shadow into your heart, it ends in madness.
It was about what she had expected.
That is a shame. Imagine if someone could withstand the Void's corruption. They would make a powerful ally against the Legion.
The Thraxian considered that.
I wouldn't talk about such things where Zira might hear. I doubt you would find many creatures like that. Wielding the Void creates a hunger for more power. And there's the trap. That drive for more brings you across the threshold. Once you start using the shadow, you will belong to the shadow. It was almost always a certainty.
Almost?
There was one.
The Thraxian had to think back.
The Locust Walker. That was what we called him. A powerful master of the Void, and yet completely free of its grasp as far as we knew. The Burning Legion lost countless lives trying to capture him. I was nearly one of them.
I am glad he did not kill you.
He did kill me. But he pulled me out of the Nether to do it.
The Thraxian laughed at the memory.
He said he saw a unique destiny for me, and wanted me to be reborn.
Locust Walker. Alleria would remember the name, but she couldn't resist asking one more question.
How many times did you die for the Legion?
I lost count.
He grinned at her.
It was pleasant, in a way, feeling your soul drift. And then Argus would drag you back, and you'd be punished for your failures. That wasn't so pleasant.
Alleria meditated on what he had told her. Perhaps there was a new way to fight the Legion. She went to Zira for guidance.
I want to find the Locust Walker, and all other beings like him.
Alleria said.
They wish to see the Burning Legion fall just as much as we do.
Alleria had expected resistance. She had not expected an ultimatum.
Understand this well, Alleria Windrunner. The light does not treat with the void. There is no alliance to be made with the shadow. It seeks to destroy or enslave every soul in this universe. It wants to consume everything.
Alleria was taken aback at Zira's cold disgust.
I understand the danger, but I am a hunter. I think as my prey does. We fight the Burning Legion now, but one day we shall face the Void. I would prefer learning how its creatures think before that war begins.
That war began before time itself. Make no mistake, Alleria. If you pursue contact with the Void, your destiny will fall into ruin. You will lose Turalyon. You will lose Arator. You will lose Silver Moon, Azeroth, and everything else you hold dear. The light and the shadow cannot exist together. You already know how to strike down the Void. That is all you need to know.
I understand, Zira.
The Naru's words were clear enough, but Alleria could not put what she had seen out of her mind. She would walk on Argus, she would see the Emerald Star, and then she would fall to darkness. Those sights had felt like glimpses of destiny, and they had been born of shadow. The other things she'd seen had not faded. She was still convinced she would see Arator again. She was still convinced the Burning Legion would be defeated. She hoped the light would grant her more clarity in the years to come. But as century after century passed, none came. She fought, she raided, she killed, but there were no more answers. And then, suddenly, the time for waiting had ended. The Burning Legion had invaded the remains of Draenor, a world now called Outland. The forces of Azeroth were mounting a desperate defense at the edge of Hellfire Peninsula, holding the line only steps from the Dark Portal. Alleria and Turalyon had lived through more than 500 years in the Twisting Nether. For Azeroth, it had been about 20 since the end of the Second War, barely a single generation. Its champions were facing another critical war. But for Alleria, this was an opportunity. She asked to speak with Turalyon and Zira in private. It hurt her deeply to lie to them, particularly to him, but she knew the truth would have been rejected.
I have had dreams over the years. Faint dreams. I see myself walking upon Argus. Then I see the Emerald Star.
Alleria spread her hands, a gesture of uncertainty.
I assumed they had to be wrong. Argus is too well defended. Or rather, it was.
Turalyon understood instantly.
The demons are invading Outland. We will never see Argus so vulnerable ever again.
Alleria expected Zira to object. She didn't.
This is what I saw before you joined us. 2 bright lights from Azeroth, finding the Emerald Star together.
Alleria flinched. That was not what she wanted.
I should go alone. One person can find a quiet entry point onto Argus more easily than 2.
Turalyon just smiled at her.
You think I can't keep up with you? I'm hurt.
I did not see anything with certainty, Turalyon. There is no reason to risk anyone else.
Do not resist your destiny, Alleria. I cannot see what happens after you arrive, but I know that you continue your war against the Legion. Go together. You will not die on Argus.
After a pronouncement like that, there was no more room for argument. Alleria and Turalyon set off deep into the twisting nether. They left the Xenadar in a small cylindrical pod. The light sustained them. The journey was quiet, stealthy, and slow. It would take a long time to reach Argus, and the pod would be their only way to escape it. As they traveled, Alleria told Turalyon the truth, or at least part of it.
The visions I saw were not from the light. That was why I wanted to go alone,
she said. Turalyon wasn't too bothered.
Wherever they came from, Zira believed them to be true. That's good enough for me,
he said.
There are other forces in the universe. If they want to aid the light in destroying the Legion, I have no objection.
Zira would.
A hint of a smile played on Turalyon's lips.
I trust her wisdom, but I trust your instincts too.
They flew on through the twisting nether. Alleria prayed he would not suffer if she had made a mistake. Long ago, the Army of the Light had learned the location of Argus. It was a world fully shrouded within the nether, and thus the army could have navigated to it at any time. But though it was easy to find, it was not easy to infiltrate. The primary stronghold of the Burning Legion was extremely well defended. It had to be. Even while the Legion was invading Outland, Kil'jaeden would not be inclined to leave his seat of power defenseless. But now there were gaps. Not every inch of the world would be guarded. When Alleria and Turalyon finally completed their journey, they hid in the chaos of the twisting nether and waited, watching for an opportunity. Some parts of Argus were filled with flickering lights, others were dark and silent. Turalyon steered their transport to an open plain, far from anything of value. They emerged into the stench of sulfur and charred rock. Nothing was alive here. When the Burning Legion had taken over this world, the demons must have stripped it down to bedrock. Turalyon regarded it grimly.
I had not thought there was any world the light had abandoned.
Welcome to Argus,
Alleria said. Turalyon gestured toward the horizon. The edge of a huge canyon was barely visible. There were many lights shining from its depths.
That looks promising.
Alleria pointed toward their transport. It had the means to open a rift back to the Xenadar.
And that is our way out. Remember the path. We may need to exit in a hurry.
They moved quickly but quietly. If the Legion learned they were here, it might not be possible to escape. The jagged terrain provided plenty of cover. There were subsurface caverns and crags that hid them from the eyes of the Legion's sparse patrols. Alleria stayed a couple of steps ahead of Turalyon, looking for signs of traps or enemies. Halfway to the canyon, she paused, tilting her head.
Someone has been here recently.
Turalyon silently drew his sword. Alleria gave him a flat stare.
Not like that, dear. Not a patrol, something else.
She pointed at a nearby cliff face. Parts of the blackened rock had scrape marks on them. There was a thin film of fresh ash at their feet. She knelt down. It was still warm.
Cooking fire. Tool marks. Someone is living out here.
Turalyon shrugged.
Hard to believe, but maybe we'll find some allies on Argus.
Alleria wasn't hopeful.
Anyone living under the Legion's nose would have to be very good at hiding, and deeply paranoid. I do not believe they will let us find them. Although...
She carefully examined the cliff face.
Staying in the open would be suicide for them. Would they not need a way to... Ah, there it is.
Click. She found what she was looking for. A loose rock turned in her hand. A small section of the cliff swung open like a door, and a tiny, narrow passage was exposed. Alleria nodded with satisfaction.
There are people living out here. This is how they travel without the Legion knowing.
Turalyon led the way through the winding tunnels, using only the smallest touch of the light for illumination. For hours, all they heard was their own heavy breathing. Whenever they came to a fork in the path, they took the tunnel that curved towards the canyon. After spending so much time in the twisting nether, they had learned how to keep their orientation without suns, stars, or landmarks to guide them. As they approached the canyon, Alleria began to feel something strange, a fluttering in her mind. She looked at Turalyon. He nodded back. He felt it too. Eventually, flickering green light started to fill the path in front of them. A dull, maddening hum reverberated through the rock around them. And then, Turalyon saw an opening. The tunnel widened here. Not a natural formation, Alleria noticed. Whoever was living here must have carved a ragged window out of a cliff face to spy on the Legion. Maybe there was a spark of resistance on Argus. Turalyon crept forward, peering carefully around the edge. Alleria wasn't far behind.
What is it?
I don't know, Alleria. Light knows I don't.
She raised her head. She was looking out over the canyon. A massive, hellish slash in the crust of Argus itself, choked with smoke and steam, and yet bitterly cold. The rumble and clamor of hammers, dark magics, and footsteps overlapped one another. They had seen fortresses on the world's surface, but those must have been outposts. This was where the Burning Legion made its armies strong. There were forges, stockpiles, demonic barracks, and countless other buildings, pits, and structures. They were not just on the canyon floor. The Legion had built them up the canyon walls. The fluttering in her mind grew louder, painfully so. Turalyon's gauntlets tightly gripped the edge of the cliff.
It's coming from over there.
He pointed away from the machines of war toward a darker portion of the canyon where silent buildings loomed in the shadows. The architecture was different. It took Alleria's mind a moment to understand what she was seeing. Over the past centuries of war, she had seen dozens of Legion strongholds. This looked nothing like those. So why did it seem so familiar? It reminded her of Azeroth, of the old ruins that predated even the earliest highborn settlements. Those had been Titan ruins. Why was she seeing Titan architecture on Argus? And what was inside? That thought seemed to attract attention. The presence in her mind was no longer fluttering. It went silent. It had noticed her. She felt a terrible warmth. She saw fire in her mind's eye. She saw a shimmering sphere of raw power, trapped, straining to escape a fell prison, an emerald prison. Then it stopped. It looked. It listened. It saw her. It screamed. A mountain of panic and horror fell upon her mind. Fear filled her thoughts so suddenly that she collapsed.
Alleria!
Turalyon pulled her back from the edge.
What is it?
That fear. It was not hers. It did not belong to her. So she shoved it away ruthlessly.
It is alive, Turalyon. Light, help us. It is alive.
He stared for a moment, not understanding. And then it must have turned its eye upon him. He flinched and went limp, groaning, fighting to regain lucidity. Alleria forced her mind to see what had been reaching out to them. Deep down in the belly of Argus, there was a creature of astonishing power, imprisoned by the green, corrupting fires of Fel.
No.
Alleria whispered.
This cannot be the Emerald Star.
By the light.
Turalyon breathed. It screamed again. The force of it made them tremble. Alleria could hear noises down in the canyon, movement, marching. Demons were beginning to stir.
The Legion knows something is wrong.
She warned. It fought against its bonds, and tremors rippled across the world. Unable to escape, it screamed again. But this time, it tried to communicate. Alleria felt as its raw emotion gave way to something else. Memories. It was sending her its entire lifetime in a single, uncontrolled burst. In that instant, while the corrupted fount of arcane might was upon her, her mind was transported elsewhere. This being was so much more powerful than the minion of the Shadow had been. Then she had witnessed flashes of destiny. Now she lived a history that surpassed the existence of the universe. Blink. It was energy, spinning out into the cosmos. Blink. It found warmth near a sun, and a world formed around it to protect it as it grew. Blink. Generations of life lived and died upon it. Blink. It was betrayed. It was bound by something powerful. Blink. Pain. Pain. It hurt so much. Its only solace lay within its dream. Blink. They enslaved worlds. They burned worlds. They used its strength to revive their fallen souls. It hurt so much. Blink. They found another. It was much more powerful. They wanted to claim it too. Then they would be unstoppable. Blink. It screamed into the cosmos for help. 2 children answered the call. 2 bright lights. Blink. 2 bright lights from Azeroth. A world that was like Argus. Alleria ripped herself free. Now she was lying on her side. Turalyon was shaking her.
Wake up! Alleria, wake up! We have to go!
She reached up, grabbed his shoulder.
Did you see?
She whispered.
See what?
He hadn't. Why hadn't he seen it? Why had she?
Argus has a soul. This world has a soul, and so does Azeroth. That is why the Legion wants it.
The confusion in his face mirrored her own. He hesitated only a moment.
Sierra will know what to do.
Turalyon closed his eyes and whispered,
We cannot free you alone, but we will return. We will end your torment. This I swear before the light.
Alleria scrambled deeper into the tunnels. Demonic shrieks filled the air. The Legion knew intruders were here. It just did not know where. She tugged on Turalyon's armor.
If we do not escape now, we never will.
They ran back the way they had come. The Legion would scour Argus to find whatever had distressed the world's soul. If the demons found their transport before Alleria and Turalyon reached it, there would be no way off this world. It took hours before Alleria and Turalyon emerged into the open air. No demons were around. A flash of hope came to life in her heart. Maybe it wasn't too late. Without a word, they both began running, sprinting as fast as they could. They crested a hill. Their transport was down there on the plain, only a few hundred paces farther. It might as well have been worlds away. The pod was the only way off of Argus. The Legion had found it and surrounded it with endless ranks of demons. There were too many, far too many. Without hesitation, Alleria and Turalyon charged. There was no choice, and no hope. The sheer audacity of their attack bought them time. They punched a hole straight through the demons' front lines. It wasn't enough. Each arrow, each thrust of a sword brought down another demon. It wasn't enough. Alleria swung her bow in an arc, obliterating a dozen with a scythe of holy power. It wasn't enough.
They must not capture us!
Turalyon growled.
They cannot take us alive!
They will not.
Turalyon ducked to his left, and she fired an arrow into the demon that was about to split his skull. Alleria shot 2 more arrows at once, killing 4. It wasn't enough, but it was settled. Better to die than be captured. If they died here, the Legion would not know where the Zenadar was hiding. Their allies would be safe. But the army of the light would gain nothing from their deaths. Had fate truly led them here just to die?
You will not die on Argus.
Zira had been so certain and so wrong. Their forward progress had slowed. The Legion's endless numbers were collapsing upon them. Alleria spotted a circle of Eridar approaching, spirals of fell magic forming into chains in their hands. They were planning to capture the 2 before they died in combat. Still, she fought on. It wasn't enough.
I cannot see what happens after you arrive.
This fate had been shrouded from Zira. Why? Why had she not seen this? Why hadn't Turalyon seen the vision from the World Soul? Why? All went quiet within Alleria's mind. The answer came not as a shout, but as a whisper, from a voice she had not heard before.
Because they are not free.
Turalyon was one with the light. Alleria was not yet. And not ever, she knew now. The fight was at a standstill. Alleria and Turalyon could move neither forward nor back. The end had come. The light could not save them.
I will see my son again,
Alleria whispered. It felt as true now as it had always been, even on the precipice of the unthinkable. She knew where that voice had come from. She knew what it wanted. And she knew only it could save them. She lashed out with the light one more time, clearing a swath of space in front of her. Then she let it go. She reached out for the void. Dark power flowed into her. She did not know how to control it, but that did not matter. Something else far away did the work for her. Something else far away wanted her to survive. She could feel its maddening whispers flooding her thoughts. A jagged portal opened from thin air, black as the darkest corner of the universe. Turalyon turned with a jolt. He stared in shock at the portal.
Alleria!
The way he said her name broke her heart. With a scream of despair, Alleria hooked her arm around Turalyon's throat and dragged him through the portal. She felt him shout in pain as he crossed its threshold. The light and the shadow cannot exist together. She could feel his pulse. Crossing through void power hadn't killed him. The portal snapped closed. Alleria collapsed on all fours, exhausted, gasping. She looked up into the swirling, shimmering mayhem of the twisting nether. She and Turalyon rested on a hunk of rock, floating in the midst of nothing, barely big enough for the 2 of them. Alleria let the shadow go, pushed it away. The whispers of madness faded. Turalyon was sprawled on his back, groaning. Alleria watched him, Pain squeezed her soul for what she had done and for what she was about to do.
We are safe. Far from Argus,
she said. He slowly sat up. His eyes took in the chaos of the Nether, and then he could do nothing but stare at her.
What did you do?
She didn't answer him. She wanted to lie to him, but she couldn't. Not again.
Alleria.
He reached for her. She pulled away.
Alleria, please. Why? Why?
Her voice was calm.
that is what I asked. Why? Then I understood. We were not meant to die on Argus today. Even Zira knew it. But she could not see how we escaped. She could not see that it was the shadow that would save us.
I would rather have died than have you fall to evil.
I know. And yet my fate has not changed. We will see our son again. We will defeat the Legion.
Alleria,
Turalyon's voice was choked with horror.
this can be undone. Ask forgiveness. Forswear the shadow. I'm sure Zira will help you.
He did not understand. Alleria could not fault him. She only understood bits and pieces of what she had done.
I was destined to walk the path of light for a long time. Now I must learn how to survive a new path.
She wished she knew what lay at the end of it. He leaned forward, grabbing her hands.
This isn't the way.
When they touched, pain shot through her. She flinched. So did he. The light and the shadow cannot exist together. He let go, looking at his hands in disbelief.
Find your way back to Zenadar. The army of the light still needs you.
Another portal, jagged and black, opened up next to her.
Just know that we are not enemies. Not now, not ever. Believe it, Turalyon. Please believe it.
Alleria, wait.
See you on the other side, my love.
She wanted to stay. She wanted nothing more than to embrace him, renounce the shadow, and return to the light. But that was not the path that would protect Azeroth. If it was her fate to fall to darkness, she needed to learn how to endure it. And if she couldn't, she needed to be far away from the people she loved, for their sakes. She pushed herself into the portal. Her last glimpse before it closed was of Turalyon. He was reaching out for her, tears staining his cheeks. He looked as if he were watching her end her own life. She was not so sure he was wrong.